like sunshine, like springtime, like something's in the water and I'm taking a deep dive. I'm feeling so weightless, like I'm gonna make it, and nothing in the universe can take this. I can see it clearly now, nothing gonna bring me down. I got my head held high, I'm on my way, and I'm following the signs to my happy place. I'm walking in the light of a brand new day, and I'm right where I belong in my happy place. I got my head held high, I'm on my way, and I'm following the signs to my happy place. I'm walking in the light of a brand new day, and I'm right where I belong in my happy place. And I'm right where I belong in my happy place. And I'm right where I belong in my happy place.
So welcome to the National University of Singapore Yong Lu Lin School of Medicine Healthy Longevity webinar. Thanks for joining us. We have Tina Woods tonight, who's going to tell us about her efforts to advance healthy longevity in the UK. And we're going to do this in the form of more of a fireside chat. So there'll be a lot of discussion, and hopefully that'll lead to a lot of questions that you might have. So use the Q&A function to ask those questions, and we will try to get to them near the end of the talk. Before we go to that, however, I want to turn to Sharon Tan in my lab, who's going to talk about a recent research paper on insulin sensitivity and long-lived growth hormone releasing hormone knockout mice.
Hello everyone, as was mentioned, I'm Sharon, and I'll be sharing with you an interesting article on insulin sensitivity in long-lived growth hormone releasing hormone knockout mice by Zhang Fang et al. A knockout model is where a gene is specifically chosen to be eliminated from the model. This study utilizes growth hormone releasing hormone, GHRH for short, knockout mice models. Studies have shown that impaired growth signaling is associated with extended longevity in mouse models. These growth hormone signaling impaired mice with improved longevity have a decrease in circulating insulin levels and enhanced systemic insulin sensitivity. Insulin acts as the central hormone controlling metabolism of carbohydrate, lipid, and protein. Insulin also modulates glucose utilization in the brain, facilitating learning, cognition, and motivation. Insulin plays a major role in many metabolic actions, such as glycogen deposition, stimulation of lipogenesis, which is the making of fatty acids, inhibition of lipolysis, which is the breaking down of fatty acids, repression of gluconeogenesis, which is making glucose from non-carbohydrate sources, and the regulation of glucose uptake via PI3K-AKT and MEPK-ERK cascades. PI3K-AKT pathway promotes cell survival and growth, while MEPK and ERK pathway amplifies signals for cell proliferation and development in cells. These GHRH knockout mice have altered activation of insulin-mediated AKT and ERK signaling pathway, which plays a role in extended longevity. This study employed hyperinsulinic euglycemic lamp to observe whole-body insulin sensitivity and immunoblotting to examine the two major insulin signaling pathways. This study shows that the longevity in GHRH knockout mice have enhanced systemic insulin sensitivity, which is associated with differential activation of insulin signaling cascades in various organs. The enhanced systemic insulin sensitivity in target tissues is likely to mediate the prolonged longevity and healthy aging effects of GHRH knockout mice. The results of this study shows that plasma insulin concentration was dramatically reduced in the GHRH knockout mice. Insulin sensitivity was significantly enhanced despite normal glucose tolerance results. Tissues most sensitive to insulin stimulation are liver, skeletal muscle, and white adipose tissues. The insulin clamp data showed that whole-body glycogen lipid synthesis was significantly elevated in GHRH knockout mice, where there's a 15-fold increase in skeletal muscle and a 3-fold increase in the liver. The authors found that the increase was associated with insulin-stimulated inactivation of glycogen synthesis kinase, or GSK. These results imply that the increased glycogen synthesis in skeletal muscle and liver are associated with AKT-mediated inactivation of GSK3 alpha and beta in GHRH knockout mice. It was discussed in this study that the growth hormone acts as a negative regulator of longevity in mammals. This means that the growth hormone prevents activities that promote longevity. That mouse models with impaired growth hormone signaling have prolonged longevity. They found that GHRH knockout model exhibits lower circulating insulin levels with no difference in glucose basal levels under fasting. This shows the relationship between insulin and glucose levels is influenced by insulin sensitivity. Their data showed that insulin-induced phosphorylation GSK3 alpha and GSK beta was significantly increased in skeletal muscle and liver of GHRH knockout mice. This supports the notion that the increase of glycogen synthesis is tightly associated with the insulin-stimulated AKT and GSK3 cascade in GHRH knockout mice. In summary, insulin-mediated metabolic changes are complex actions involving interaction of multiple organs in the long-lived GHRH knockout mice. The results of this study suggest improved insulin actions in various tissues via activation of AKT and ERK1 and 2 cascades are likely to mediate the prolonged longevity and healthy aging effects. That concludes my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Sharon. In the meantime, though, we have Tina Woods here tonight, which is fantastic. We're going to talk more about healthy longevity in the UK. Tina is a social entrepreneur and positive disruptor who brings people together to drive changes. And the change she's interested in is healthy longevity. She's founded Collider Health, Business for Health, and also the AllParty Parliamentary Group for Longevity. And so I'm sure she'll tell us a little bit about that today. We're going to have a discussion, but Tina, maybe first, if you could just spend a few minutes telling us a little bit about what you're trying to do to bring healthy longevity to everyone.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Brian, and thanks to all of you attending this webinar. So hopefully you can hear me okay. I'm based in London in the UK, just getting used to the idea of actually being able to emerge from lockdown. It's been an interesting year in the UK. Now, I'll tell you a little bit, I guess, about the journey that I've been on to really understand the healthy longevity landscape and the ecosystem as it's been really evolving quite significantly over the past 2 to 3 years when I first started to get really, really engaged in this space. So I'll tell you a little bit about my journey. And I remember speaking, the last time I met Brian, face to face was funnily enough in Singapore, a little over a year ago today. And I remember it was just the UK was just recognizing that COVID was sort of a virus that we had to take seriously. So I was there in early February, and of course the UK went into lockdown in March. And I remember the first thing that happened when I entered the hotel was getting my temperature checked, and I realized, Singapore is taking this very, very seriously. And I think I see everything in terms of system change, and I've been fascinated throughout my whole professional life, really about, I've always been fascinated with the whole sort of mechanisms of life and biology, and I studied genetics, way back as an undergrad when I was sort of pre-med. I didn't pursue a medical degree in the end, but fell into a very, very different career path and journey myself. I did a lot of work in the pharmaceutical industry, actually, for many, many years. So I've got a good grounding, I guess, in that kind of the hard-edged sort of science, biotech kind of pharma end of things. But I became really, really interested in a lot of the sort of forces, sort of about 8-9 years ago, technology was, increasingly kind of pervading everything. And of course, we have the aging demographic, which has been a massive disruptive force, and of course has driven a lot of the developments that we're seeing in longevity science and research, and of course is at the heart of, I know, your lab and the work that you've been doing. But of course, in a funny sort of way, COVID and the pandemic is the biggest disruptor that no one ever predicted. That's suddenly changed quite a lot, certainly in this field for healthy longevity. And so I started working about sort of 4 or 5 years ago when I first set up Collider Health with this idea that really to drive system change in health. And I was very, very interested in how do we re-gear kind of the system to kind of move from the sort of the sickness model more to a preventative health and well-being model. So we have many industries and institutions that have been very much built around sort of the sick, what do we do when we're sick? We've got the pharma industry, and obviously it's certainly in the UK, our NHS and care system, it's pretty much an ill health model.
Can I jump in really quick? I'm a little choppy on my end, so you keep talking. I'm going to log out and log back in. So just if I disappear, don't get nervous.
That's fine. I'll keep talking for a bit. I've just started, so don't worry. So I was fascinated about how do we drive long-term sort of sustainable change to improve health for people, so that was sort of what set me up initially to set up Collider Health to build ecosystems to drive change, systemic change. And I started to do quite a lot of work in the public sector, which was the first time actually that I started working in the public sector, working with our academic health science network, and then eventually with NHS, and then worked with a lot of the individuals who eventually have now formed NHSX, which is our sort of technology arm of the NHS. And then also started working with UK Research and Innovation on the Healthy Aging Industrial Strategy Challenge. So in 2017, the UK government, they invested, they basically published the industrial strategy for the UK. And this is all before Brexit, which I'm sure many of you have heard about. Of course, we've now left the EU. So all this, so the UK published this industrial strategy, and there are 4 key pillars. So AI and data was one, and of course I would argue that's something that runs through everything, which of course it does, but energy, clean mobility, and then the aging society. So those are the 4 sort of industrial challenges. So the UK government putting a lot of investment behind this, and obviously trying to develop the whole kind of business community and the life and the sort of the business sectors around that in terms of the ambition for the UK in these key areas. And so I started working with the healthy aging aspect of that aging society grand challenge. And I was tasked working with UKRI to sort of look at the ecosystem, look at big business, look at the corporate sector who might want to work collaboratively with public sector, but also, of course, the SME, the startup and the SME sector, which, we're very used to working with UKRI and the grant systems and all the rest of it. So it dawned upon me there, here we have this huge opportunity. We've got this growing aging demographic. We've got, if you add up all the plus 50 population around the world, they would create a sort of a country and an economy third after China and the US. I mean, it's such a sizable sort of population, and they have most of the disposable wealth. I mean, even coming out of COVID. I mean, but yet the business community, weren't really kind of taking stock of this, just, the sheer commercial potential, but let alone the social imperative to really address this. And I know Singapore is quite different. They've responded to not just the challenge of aging, but actually the opportunity of aging in a very, very different way than the UK, and we've had a lot to learn from Japan and Singapore and other countries that have kind of seen aging as a more positive force rather than just kind of like a challenge that needed to be managed. So culturally, I think the UK is in a very different place. I think it's changing a lot now, part of which to do with all the efforts of UKRI. But it dawned on me then that we had a massive cultural challenge really at heart here to kind of change how we see health, how we see healthy aging, etc. So that, and in 2017, the government at the time, they set a goal which kind of underpinned all the focus of the industrial strategy program on 5 extra years of healthy life expectancy while minimizing health inequalities by 2035. So that was a government goal that was set. It underpinned the industrial strategy. It became very much the galvanizing kind of mission of the UKRI program. And so, but what was missing, I mean, there's money going into the system, but what was missing was actually the action plan, the strategy to achieve the impact. How are we going to achieve this goal? So that was when one thing led to another. And by that point, I've been doing a lot of work on data and AI, and started getting very fascinated with all the work, of course, Brian and many of the longevity scientists around the world, the sheer pace of change and sheer explosion of research in longevity medicine and science and healthy aging was really, really fascinating. And we wanted to make sure that we could harness that. And so we set up a social enterprise to manage the formation of the AllParty Parliamentary group for longevity in 2019 in March. And really what we wanted to do there was to pull in government and policymakers, working with industry, working with public sector, working indeed with the citizens, to kind of reframe how we see growing older in the UK, how we see the marketplace, how we could really get business behind this, how we could get the consumer behind this. And of course, the mindset shift that needed to take place was actually almost the biggest one, because we had to see growing older as a more positive thing and see the opportunities of it in a way that certainly Japan and Singapore have. But also, the biggest challenge that we still face is actually not seeing our NHS and our healthcare system as the catch-all to basically pick up the pieces when things go wrong. So the prevention focus, the proactive sort of focus really had to kind of take hold. And so very, very quickly, in a period of about 9 months, we managed to galvanize and form the AllParty Parliamentary Group. It's chaired by Damien Green, who at the time was Deputy Prime Minister with Theresa May when they first set the goal of 5 extra healthy years while minimizing health inequality. So HLE+5 is our shorthand. We formed a fantastic and very influential parliamentary group. We had Lord Filkin, who had just stepped down from the Centre for Ageing Better, come in and take the reins to be our Strategic Advisory Board chair. And before we knew it, in 9 months, we had well over 50 organizations, well over 100 experts, all advising us on the strategy. And so we published the strategy for a healthier nation, for healthier, longer lives in February 2020. It was just after I'd come back from Singapore, meeting Brian for that meeting that we had, which was the National Association of Medicine Global Healthy Longevity Grand Challenge Program. And people were interested in what we were doing with the APPG, so I spoke about that. And then, of course, got back to England. We were just sort of thinking, oh gosh, COVID is sort of lurking. Published this strategy. We had Matt Hancock, our Secretary of State there. Got lots of acclaim and support for the 9 recommendations. And then, of course, immediately after COVID struck, so government and the NHS heads down, dealing with the crisis. But as we saw the data coming out, we realized that actually our 9 recommendations were really, really fundamental and even more urgent. Because, of course, we could see with the data, it was hitting our most vulnerable, it was hitting our older populations, it was hitting our, most disadvantaged communities. So while we were sort of in lockdown and all the rest of it, we decided to focus on 2 of the 9 recommendations. So one of them was this idea of mobilizing the business community more and seeing them as a much more sort of important and sort of positive potential, and increase the positive contributions that business could do to the nation's health. So we did a scoping exercise about what this business coalition could look like. And about 6 months after that, in November 2020, so about 6 months ago, we launched Business for Health as a social enterprise. And our focus is mobilizing the business community to look at how we can positively enhance the role of business in contributing positively to the nation's health while minimizing the harms. Because, of course, we know that there are certain industries, obviously tobacco and alcohol industry speak for themselves, but we also know that the food industry is certainly one that needs to be kind of looked at very, very carefully, our whole food system. And the fact is that we are eating way too much ultra high processed food, and that's causing serious problems with obesity. And of course, obesity is now a massive issue for the UK government to tackle, not least because I know Boris Johnson himself, when he almost died from COVID, he put it down to him being, quite overweight at the time. So that's obviously helped the cause and put obesity on the map. So we formed the Business Coalition. I'll come on to that in a second in terms of the detail, and maybe that could be one of our questions, Brian, because we're doing a huge amount of work there at the moment, which is quite interesting. But the other plank of work, which is very, very linked also to Brian and longevity science, is the Open Life Data Framework group that we set up, so which is really looking at widening the whole view of the data ecosystem. And actually a lot of the insights will feed into some of the work for Business for Health, because really what we're looking at there is to really understand, at the moment, that policy investment, is all very, very focused on NHS data, life sciences, products and services, that deal with sickness. But what we wanted to do was say, hang on a second, there's this whole marketplace that UK research and innovation are interested in supporting on healthy, products and services to keep us healthy and well. And what we need to understand is, well, what is it that keeps people healthy and well? So you need data across the life course. You need the sort of data that, of course, from a longevity science perspective, it's at the heart of actually understanding, what puts us at risk of disease. It's all linked to the biology of aging. It's, our innate health status, biological age, all the things that I know, Brian, your lab is looking at, and the interventions, and also, the sort of the biomarkers of aging, and understanding that, all comes from data that, exists when we're, comes from, understanding our state when we're healthy and well, rather than just focus on when we move into that ill state. So the Open Life data framework, we decided to look at, again, while COVID was sort of, we're all in lockdown, we ran a few sort of scoping groups, and we had the UK government at the time was looking at the UK, the broad, national data strategy. So I see, and I'm sure most scientists and those, doing research in aging biomarkers and really trying to understand, and using AI and all the rest of it, to understand patterns across data sets. Data infrastructure and data sharing and interoperability is so key to this, and potential, new models for sharing, and even new business models, because of course there's a lot of concern about, data sharing, which is just driving up profits of big tech and all that sort of stuff. So what we wanted to do is look at, well, how can we open up the ecosystem, put a spotlight on understanding all the data that exists in the healthy space, all the non-health data for health, supermarket data, all the sort of stuff that paints a picture of actually how we're living our lives, and understanding that, how do we access those data sets in private sector, combine it with our public sector data sets, and, using all the latest technologies and privacy preserving software and federated learning and AI and all that sort of stuff. How do we use that ecosystem to really understand all the products and services that could potentially position the UK, certainly coming out of Brexit, and linked to our global ambitions to be a scientific superpower, which you may have read about. And of course, we've got Joe Biden now meeting with Boris Johnson on this new Atlantic partnership, really harnessing our life sciences industry, our fintech, our sort of experience in tech, our creative industries, looking at all the opportunities of developing products and services to keep us healthy and well, which of course link in with this mission of HLE+5. So we're now midstream in this piece of work. We're actually, so Laura O'Shaughnessy, who is very experienced, former health minister and former Undersecretary of State for Health, and very involved in the space, very involved in AI. We're now working also with Gavin Starks, who was the co-architect of open banking in the UK. And the whole premise is, how do we create the governance structure and the data infrastructure to enable data sharing, to open up the innovation system, to make it easier for small companies to work with big companies, to enhance data sharing in a way that will unlock the potential of all the work that, of course, longevity science is based on. The biomarkers, aging biomarkers, looking at the patterns between data sets, looking at composite biomarkers that could tell us, at an individual level, sort of our innate health status, our biological age, all those sorts of things could potentially be really opened up with this piece of work. And it will also feed into the work that we're doing with Business for Health, because what we're looking at there is creating a business index. So we're literally in the process of running a survey and roundtables later this month to look at what a business index, how do we measure business contribution to health, both in terms of workforce health, but also in terms of products and services, but also externalities, the wider aspects in the role of business in communities and society. So taking a leaf out of climate, the whole climate change experience, who use now the ESG frameworks to guide, very, very serious investment to net zero. Well, we're saying, hang on a second, especially coming out of COVID, and certainly the UK, we had the worst record of any European country in terms of how we suffered from COVID. And it was all, pretty much down to our very poor health as a nation.
I'm glad you put European in there, because otherwise I would have argued with you about the US having the worst outcome.
Well, that's a whole other story. And of course, the US are experiencing a lot of the same issues that we have, chronic, lifestyle-driven chronic diseases. We're suffering a lot from the same issues, but it's all linked with underlying inequalities. And so that is a massive focus of our next piece of work coming out. And this is wearing my AllParty Parliamentary Group hat now. We published a report in April, just 2 months ago, coming out of COVID. Well, what does our health of the nation strategy look like now coming out of COVID, when pretty much the world, and certainly the UK, has sort of woken up to this reality that thinking, hang on a second, this pandemic is really showing how we have to take our health far more seriously. We have to put more focus on prevention. We have to keep healthy to ward off, our risk, to develop our innate health resilience to future pandemic threats. So we published a follow-on report called Levelling Up Health, which links in certainly to the UK's ambition to address the massive inequalities that we've seen through COVID. Health and wealth go together. You can't have a wealthy, prosperous nation without dealing with the health of your population. So that is almost like the penny dropped, and is a massive focus of the work now. In order to be healthy, we have to tackle some of these very, these great inequalities that exist, throughout society. And that, of course, is a very similar issue that, of course, the US has experienced. So in that sense, there are some huge parallels. Yeah. And I know, and the US have actually been quite interested, my colleagues in the US have been quite interested in how we've approached it as a systemic opportunity, dealing with government, business, public sector, and involving citizens in driving some of the change that we need to see moving forward coming out of COVID. I'll stop there for a moment, because I could talk forever, but it's been a fascinating journey throughout.
It seems like the NHS has really tried to become more aware of the potential of understanding aging. And I don't, do you feel that way? And is that translating into more research, or how what's the outcome of this interest? It's easy to set a target goal, but the question is how to get there, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's, obviously there's been a huge amount of change. Just, we had a change of government. I mean, obviously Boris Johnson, he's in government. It's still relatively new in terms of their approach. Obviously, COVID has, completely had to rejig everything, our priorities as a nation. And obviously we're dealing with kind of economic recovery. But I think, certainly, I think what seems to be interesting to me is sort of coming out. I mean, I'm kind of like an outsider in on a lot of these different areas of government policy, and then, of course, working with industry and public sector. It seems that certainly from a healthy longevity perspective, I think what's interesting is how, when I first started working in the space, it was very, when people talked about longevity, it was all like, oh, what are the billionaires doing in Silicon Valley? And it's that living forever and all those sorts of things, that sharp end of research, which is fascinating. But actually where things have moved is obviously really, really focusing on how can we harness that research. And of course, when COVID struck, a lot of the longevity scientists were the first to kind of get onto the the ticket and say, listen, sort of aging and innate resilience building is where it's at. We need to focus on that. So I think it seems that healthy longevity has kind of come through a really interesting process of a rebranding, so to speak. It's become much more focused on, listen, how can we use all that amazing science and really, really focus on making sure that it reaches, everybody or more people than just those who can afford it, for example. Yeah. But also focusing on that health bit, the health span bit, and reducing, the morbidity end at the end, and making our lives as good as possible for as long as we can until we die. So that's kind of like where it's at, and certainly that you can see in terms of the focus that I can see, and generally how we talk about it. How that's translating in research money is interesting, but certainly the way that it's communicated, it's very, very different. So we still, from a UK government perspective, I mean, obviously because of COVID, some of the terminology started to change. But what is good to see is healthy longevity has started to enter the lexicon. And of course, we will see very soon in terms of the Build Back Better strategy, the growth plans for Britain, linked to Britain wanting to be a science and tech superpower. I think there's a massive opportunity to kind of harness everything that Britain is good at, working with the rest of the world to really harness all this amazing research, for the good of as many people as possible, building that resilience and health and innate health, healthy living and healthy lives, which again is a fundamental part of, also warding off, future pandemic, effects on us as individuals. So, and at a population level. So
it's funny, because we knew this about influenza forever, right? It affects older people, people with low resilience, frail people. I think we tended to ignore the fact that aging is not just about chronic disease, but it's about the severity of infectious disease. Yeah. And it's an interesting convergence as well, because I think the aging field even 5 years ago was still extremely heavily preclinical in what it was doing. And now, at least the area I'm from, and now we've just come to the time when we can test interventions in humans and validate that things in health span. So these two things are coming together, and I'm hoping it translates into a real push toward going back to healthcare and targeting aging, because that's the biggest driver of loss of health. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens coming out of COVID, but I think putting together a plan like this is really important. I mean, one of the challenge, I heard a couple, you talked about 2 points of this that are coming out, the main things you're focusing on with this parliamentary panel. And, one of them is this data issue, and it's really it's got to be a confounding issue, right? Because it's also true with the business side. I mean, aging touches everything. And so when you talk about business interests, you're not talking about Pfizer only, and you're talking about all kinds of different businesses in all sectors of the economy. So how do you take a complex issue like that, or a complex issue like data sets all over the place and on all kinds of different topics, not just healthcare, and integrate that into a coherent strategy? That sounds like a big challenge.
It is a humongous challenge, and in many ways we're absolutely crazy to do it, but it has to be done, because it's the only way that you can focus properly on prevention and get all the key stakeholders lined up to be able to do something about it. Because at the moment, what we have at the moment is just perpetuating the current status quo, and that's not going to do it. So, the fact is, and certainly the message from COVID for most healthcare systems, and certainly the UK is one of them, it is unsustainable to continue to think that our healthcare system can pick up the pieces. We've got a growing aging demographic, and especially when we're living unhealthy lives, so we have to tackle that. We have to get with the program and actually recognize that it's going to take a massive rethink in how our institutions, our funding from government, where we're channeling efforts. It's a massive rethink. So the way that we've approached it with the AllParty Parliamentary Group, which kind of has been called almost like an incubator of innovation, because we've taken kind of an old idea of the AllParty Parliamentary Groups. I mean, there are hundreds that exist, but what is great about them is that you can involve, multiple parties. But what we've done is made sure that we take a cross-sector approach. So in all the discussions coming up with our strategy and all the things that we're doing coming out, as far as the actions coming out of the strategy, we're harnessing all the different stakeholders. So, industry, public sector, government, because that's what it takes, because you have to see everything from outside your own walls. The life sciences industry is not the only industry that has all the answers. Our NHS does not have all the answers. And in some ways, they're the ones responsible for perpetuating the paradigms, so those need to be broken apart. And so that's the hard bit. But I think, once we bring people together, and I think this is where the mission focus has been so invaluable. We have, 5 extra years of healthy life expectancy while minimizing health inequalities as our sort of North Star. And you can't really argue with that. It's like, and especially coming out of COVID, we know that keeping healthy and well is just so fundamental to our future prosperity and economic prosperity. Because, I think the one thing that, the one things that I've taken, and of course, looking outside the UK as well, we do try and look outside. And of course, like Singapore, obviously Singapore has, we reckon, you're first to, you're right on it with the COVID, testing and being, absolutely, your whole healthcare system is absolutely, we're on it. You're much more, I think culturally, you're much more, I guess, positive about, old age and supporting healthy aging. You've got the mechanisms in place where you're getting people to work for longer. You're supporting them through their old age to be able to continue to be productive members of society. You're incentivizing that whole view that, just because you're getting older doesn't mean you're sort of, that you sort of, become less important to society. It's about making sure that you can continue to be active members of society. So that kind of, those sorts of ideas and frameworks are so important to get to learn from in terms of how we deal with it in the UK. So our ill health is responsible for a huge amount of economic inactivity. If you're in ill health in your 50s and you drop out of work, out of the labor force, that's a massive drain on the economy. So we need to do more and take a leaf from what Singapore have done, actually.
Well, and it goes both ways. Because if you drop out of work, that facilitates your ill health. And, one of the things I'm always telling people is that you need to find ways to keep people engaged and active. And that could be working, it could be doing something else. But
Oh, it could be volunteering, anything.
Yeah,
Yes.
but if we don't empower people as they get older and keep them feel like they have a role to help in society, then they lose their motivation, and that's a big driver of ill health. And so those things go, it's a circular process, really.
It absolutely is. And I would say, and so one of my passions in life, and I've always been fascinated with, biology and of course, life and death. And, that to me has always been a really, really interesting and that's why I study genetics. And so clearly that's something that I personally find really, really interesting as an individual. And that's kind of like my passion that drives a lot of my energy actually into a lot of the work. I'm very interested in prevention, all those sorts of things. But in the end, and this is what I find so interesting, I mean, because I will do a mini plug on the book that I wrote, which of course
I was going to bring that up.
Yeah, and I'll just show it. It's the Live Long with AI. It was published in October last year, just during COVID, and in fact I had to change the flavor of the book a little bit because of COVID. But the one thing that really struck me that was so interesting interviewing, and I interviewed all the leading longevity pioneers like Alexander Boronkov, and by the way, I listened to a fascinating webinar yesterday that his team done on Pandomics, and I mean there's just so much fascinating work in that space. And Aubrey de Grey, of course, is the godfather of aging. I mean, and the leading, pioneer, and and you and many others. What I always ask the question, what is it that keeps you going? I mean, what's your secret? And, in the end, it kind of boils down to, yes, we may have, all these fancy pills and all the rest of it, but actually a lot of it boils down to what keeps you interested and what is your passion. And that kind of, as soon as you give up, you give up life, and that's when you perish. And so, I think that's a massive, and if you look at the blue zone countries, they often say that, and they call it ikigai, I think in Japan, that sense of purpose that kind of keeps you going. These are really, really important. And I think that in a funny sort of way, I think is almost like we've reached a zeitgeist moment, coming out of COVID, where I think people are recognizing some of the big issues that have created some of the big societal kind of fissures, coming out of COVID. And I think, there's been a real, and this is where I think the Business for Health work is so interesting, and trying to get, see everything in a much more sustainable way. And I think we're already seeing a rise of the conscious consumer and sustainability and all these sorts of things. I think people are they're searching for different solutions to some of the big challenges that we as a world are facing. So I think the work that we're trying to do to bring health into ESG, for example, it's kind of touching a nerve. We're kind of, and interestingly, and I'll just say a little bit about what we're doing at the moment with Business for Health. So we're literally in the throes of running this, looking at how we design this business index. And we're taking inspiration, for example, at the moment, the Office for National Statistics in the UK, they've just published a health index, and what they're seeing. And what's interesting about that, it was the brainchild of our former chief medical officer, working with many others. It's kind of seeing health as an asset-based sort of entity, and they're measuring health on the basis of healthy people, healthy lives, and healthy places. And so we're taking a lead from that. And of course, they've taken inspiration also from other models around the world, like New Zealand. Of course, they've got their well-being sort of model and how they guide their investment at a government level in terms of not just seeing it as in GDP terms. So I think all that is creating a whole sea change in how we see our health, how it's connected to a wider ecosystem, people and planet. It's all these sorts of things, this wider ecosystem, and things like biodiversity and the One Health model, for example, seeing everything in terms of people, planet, and animals, for example. These are really starting to hit the general public as well. So we're running this business, we've just done the survey. We've got a series of roundtables happening later this month. We've been in touch with the World Economic Forum and the OECD, who of course have been doing a lot of work on well-being measurements as well. So we're hoping that the work that we're doing will also be relevant internationally. But what it's doing there is saying, hang on a second, and just looking at, the different industries at the moment, which ones are the ones really generating health for people? Because we also know that there's a lot of industries who generate a lot of harm. And I'm not just talking about tobacco and alcohol. We know, and I'm just talking about the food industry. And this is where I think, omics research and, this wider, microbiome and this wider kind of omics space. And I'm really interested in this concept of the exposome, how we react to all these different environmental triggers. And we know that food is it has a massive role to play in terms of our innate health. And so we've got this problem where, we've now become addicted to, and this is, I think, the big problem in the UK and certainly the US, to junk food. We eat less and less real kind of whole food. And and the food industry has a huge part to play in that in terms of helping us move towards healthier options. And then, of course, going back to the data work, and learning from like how the business sector does nudge us. Let's make sure that we're nudging us to healthier behaviors rather than negative health behaviors.
Yeah,
so we're looking at all that marketing, lobbying, looking at the food industry and saying, hang on a second, rather than, continue to invest in research that props up your marketing claims on health, your healthy claims. Let's really get real and really, really focus on what foods are really generating health and get, and so it's kind of, so I think it's about a data-driven approach using data to really put a spotlight on where we could do so much more in a period of transition, weaning us off of really unhealthy behaviors, using technology and data to nudge us towards healthy behaviors and getting industry behind us, not naming and shaming them, but just learning together and actually just saying, listen, this is a system change, and we've got to just get real and just, stop doing what we know is killing us.
This junk food issue, though, is actually a big issue, but also an inequality, because it's, it's really, for people that have income challenged, and they may be single parents, and they don't have time to cook healthy food. They're buying the cheapest food they can get quickly, and it's exacerbating the health disparities as well. So,
well, I mean, in the UK, certainly, we know in our poorest areas, those most economically disadvantaged, you will see that there are about 20 times more, fried chicken shops, right on their doorstep than healthy kind of outlets. And
remember, I'm from Kentucky, so just remember that. Right?
Sorry. Well, I'm just saying sort of junk food shops then. It's basic, and unfortunately the local small shops, who are obviously coming out of COVID, they're desperate to kind of, bring back their income and recovery. I mean, most of their income comes from selling sweets after school to children and like fizzy drinks. And so we've got to change, licensing, labeling, we have to change the economics, we have to make it's more cost effective and easy to choose healthier options. So there's a huge amount of work to be done. But fortunately, the UK government, and actually when we launched our Levelling Up Health report 2 months ago, we had Matt Hancock, our Secretary of State for Health and Care, supporting us. We had our Chief Medical Officer there, Chris Whitty. And we also had Henry Dimbleby, who's just about to publish the National Food Strategy, which is all around how we need to completely shake up the whole food system and actually really kind of tackle this. It is a massive, massive problem in terms of obesity, healthy children, our start in life. It is huge. So one of the use cases in the Open Life data work that we're doing is going to look at supermarket data, how we can look at who are the most vulnerable, who are the least the least healthy populations, what we can do to incentivize them to healthier food options, find them in the first place, but then incentivize them. This is where club cards and all that sort of stuff can be really, really mobilized, and then working with government to also introduce legislation that might be all the different tweaks that we need to make to actually make it easier to get healthy food, even if you're not wealthy.
So you have all these minor little challenges you're trying to deal with, and then Brexit hits. I mean, is there any sense of what the long-term impact's going to be on these kinds of initiatives?
Do you know what? In a funny sort of way, yes, we're kind of still feeling away on Brexit. And of course, obviously we're having a little challenges with Ireland and the whole kind of EU and which is in the press at the moment. And I know Joe Biden's very keen on us sorting that out. But it's interesting. I mean, I think we've kind of got over the Brexit thing. I think COVID, it suddenly took over as our main worry. And clearly Brexit has introduced challenges on supply chain and certain industries and all the rest of it. But I think COVID has introduced far bigger challenges, to be perfectly frank. And I think that's what's really focused government at the moment, in the here and now, is how can we re-emerge from COVID, which has had a terrible effect on the British economy. I mean, far more than most countries, what we can do to get us out of it. And I think health, and one of our partners actually in Business for Health is the CBI, the Confederation for Business Industry, and they've recognized that health is one of the 7 key areas that we're going to get out of this crisis. It is so connected with our economic recovery. So health, has really assumed a massive priority in terms of government attention. So if we can harness it for the good of all, and making sure that all the research, all the the policy initiatives, making sure that we're focusing our efforts on building back our communities that need the most support, who are the least healthy. These are the sorts of things that are very much top of the government attention at the moment.
How fast do you think things can move? I mean, it's 5 years of extra health span sounds great. I mean, life expectancy's generally been going up anyway, but this is an acceleration that's really mediated by targeting aging and preventative medicine, and you're really trying to change the course of some big ships. And so, I mean, what's your outlook? I mean, how positive are you?
Well, I think in a funny sort of way, COVID has a massive silver lining, although brutal as it was and still is. It has been an accelerant.
Yeah.
It has been a complete disruptor in so many different ways.
Yeah.
I mean, the kind of things that are happening now, you would never have imagined. I mean, the level of state intervention for a start, to rescue the economy and, all those sorts of things that the government, investment, the investment in infrastructure and all these sorts of things are, and I think the whole move, the digital acceleration that we've seen, I mean, we have to be mindful that there are some challenges because it could even create bigger divides for those who don't have access to digital technology. But I think, we have certainly seen an massive uptake in the use of digital, for example, across the board in many industry sectors and certainly in healthcare. Older populations are now getting used to using technology in a way that, many people wouldn't have thought possible. So I think, there have been huge accelerants. And I think in terms of healthy aging and healthy longevity, I think definitely in the UK, there has become, we obviously have to rescue. There's a lot of rescuing at the moment. I mean, for example, our waiting lists for chronic disease like cancer, cardiovascular disease, and all the rest are gigantic, and they need to be resolved. And of course, that's going to take up a lot of attention and money and investment and focus. But I think longer term, if we can get this right, if we can, and again, this comes down to the system change, but I think now is the time, and we have to do it now, is to line up all the different actors, together who can work and look at the long term, where the payback, if you get it right, will be so gigantic. So that's where we need to really keep to the long term. Yes, focus with the here and now, which are critical, but get it right, and the prize will be huge if we can, be healthier.
That sounds great. I mean, maybe we'll stop there and take some questions. Diogo? So this is Diogo Berardo, who's a postdoc in my lab, who came from Jan Gruber's lab here at NUS, and he's an AI expert and a biostatistician. So he's going to take all of this data and make sense for it. But
we need more people like you.
He's only been in the lab a couple of weeks, so maybe we'll give him a little bit of time to do that and go back to the questions.
Okay, thanks, Brian. It's a pleasure, Ms. Wood. So the first question from the audience is, how can big business balance profit seeking with concerning about aging?
So how can big business balance profit seeking with healthy aging?
Yes, correct.
So fantastic question, and it is a massive and hugely important question, and that is exactly what we're tackling in the Business for Health program. So really what we're saying is that let's make sure that, I mean, we know business exists they need to make money to survive. That's not in question. But the thing is, let's make sure while they're making money that they're doing, it's a force for good rather than harming our health. So that's the trick to get right. So we've already seen, for example, if I go back to the climate change experience, we know that, big companies they're disinvesting in fossil fuels, coal industries, all that sort of stuff, the insurance industry. That's all guided initially because fundamentally the consumers, they recognize that this is not the future. We need to be looking at the climate change that's hitting us, clean energy, net zero, all those sorts of things. So with that understanding and focus, what that means is that investment is no longer going into those industries that are harming our climate. We need to have exactly the same principles apply. We need to make sure we are investing in companies that do not harm our health and hopefully improve our health. So it's exactly the same principle. So really what this business index that we're developing now, and if, in fact, health data is far more advanced and plentiful than environmental data. We can harness that. And of course, using all the amazing technologies and AI and all the wonderful stuff that you're doing, let's make sure that we are really, really understanding what is it, how can we make sure that we increase our health? What are the products and services, that are damaging it? Let's change them. Whether through carrot or stick approaches, it might need government intervention, different labeling, policy, or it might just be business saying, hang on a second, we've got the rise of the conscious consumer who only want to buy healthy products. Let's make sure that we're providing those sort of products. Let's make it easier and cheaper and nudge people towards those healthy behaviors. So it's kind of like good business, it means good business. So, we want to see what's happening in climate change to be exactly what we see happening now in health, which is about 10 years behind the climate change agenda. But I think on top of that, if I can just add, this is more on the data side. At the moment, we've got this tussle, China versus US, we've got big tech, and then of course we know, China, and of course, as we can see with the whole G7 conference at the moment, and of course Joe Biden's, talking about they've suddenly announced and managed to get through a gigantic amount of money to invest in all the technologies of the future, recognizing, that China has been doing, an incredible amount there, which is, a huge competitive threat globally and geopolitics and all that sort of stuff. I think in a similar sort of way, we have to look at how can we harness data in a way that is not just about, driving up profits of big tech and all the rest of it, which is basically pretty much the business model at the moment. How can we see data in a way that's very, very different? Looking to countries like Estonia, who have this, this e-citizen model, and where they share their data and where they see it in a very, very different way in terms of the public utility of data. So I think there are some very, very different ideas, ethical ideas that we can bring into this whole arena of business, and harnessing, data from business as well as public sector, and in the reimagining of all the sorts of different strategies that we can implement to really keep individuals, but also populations healthy and well. And how do we incentivize that with the right mix of, carrots and sticks, policy versus, the core way, and the profit incentive in business, but link that with good for society. And then I think we're on a winning, it's a win-win for everybody.
And I think that you mentioned the different countries involved, and that's something I think we also need to emphasize, is that health is not a competitive issue. It should be an issue that all countries can come around and work globally to try to improve the lives of their citizens. And I know that sounds a little bit naive, but I think we have to keep pushing that envelope. Absolutely. Because it's so important.
Well, let's look at the vaccination, the global vaccination strategy now. We none of us can be healthy until everyone is healthy. I mean, if you're talking about pandemics. So I think that's a really, really good analogy to remind ourselves that we're in this all together. We're all connected in this wider universe and ecosystem. I mean, it's just the way it is.
Yeah. Diogo?
Yes, we have plenty of questions coming in, actually. So one of them is, you're doing this business index. Have you faced any resistance? And did you face more resistance, if you did, from the government or private sector?
So that's a fascinating question. And I would say, well, first, for a start, we're literally just the beginning of this journey. So if you speak to me in 6 months, we'll have a lot more to say, because we'll have gone through the whole process. But of course, the business index is a potential threat to all those industries and businesses that at the moment are damaging our health. So, so we had some interesting discussions. For example, what businesses will we want to involve in business for health just generally? What are the ethical guiding principles that we are going to be guided by? So we know that no matter, unfortunately, tobacco, I mean, there's no way getting around it. Tobacco kills people and is still killing many, many people, and is still creating massive harm that unfortunately is being picked up by our health system. So there is an industry there that, of course, is not going to like what we're doing. But we already have lots of developments underway that is already tackling that. But we've also got, the food and drink industry. So I think there's going to be a certain amount of kind of threat there. But I don't want to see it as a threat, because I think this is a process of transition. It's like in anything. We've realized the problem. There are some solutions to it. It doesn't mean, you're going to, that you're going to necessarily be harmed as a business. But I think what it does mean is that you have to understand that your business will have to evolve. And that's what we're saying. Listen, you're here now, but you should be here. And, the consumer is going to drive it anyway, because the information and the data is out showing the realities. And this is where the index will be very, very helpful. And especially if it's evidence-based, data-driven, you can't hide behind it. It's going to say, listen, this is the picture. You either try and increase your rating on this index, and that will benefit you commercially, or you don't, and then you're going to suffer. Yeah. So it's about improvement rather than naming and shaming. But of course, we're already getting a bit of resistance from, if you're a confectionery manufacturer, if you're only making chocolate, you're not going to look too good on the index. But we also have to recognize, and this is the balance that has to be struck, I'm always going to want to have probably more wine than I should drink. I'm always going to have that chocolate bar. We're all going to, we all have personal and individual choice in all this. And of course, there's so-called things that we shouldn't do, but it's part of a balanced picture. And I think that's the important message.
Well, the conclusion there is it's dark chocolate with maybe blueberries or pomegranate.
Dark chocolate I love, and I do love blueberry. And I know red wine has lots of reserve.
Also, they look at the pharmaceutical industry. I don't want to paint them as a bad industry, because they do many, many good things. But how do we get them refocused on prevention? They're so focused on treating sick people right now, and it's a great profit scheme. But we need their knowledge and their capacity focused on keeping people healthy.
Yeah. I think, of course they recognize that the big blockbuster model of drugs is already dead and gone. I mean, that left years ago as we've moved into this era of personalization of medicine, all the rest of it. So they will have to move with the times. And I think there are certainly many who are already moving with the times, becoming much more involved in preventative therapeutics and digital therapeutics. And, so I think, companies like Novartis and, MSD, they're and GSK, they know that they have to start looking at alternative revenue for to continue to be successful businesses, and it will be in the preventative health space. Of course, we're always going to get sick, and of course, so I think it's a process of transition, and I think some are a bit more advanced than others, all looking to what it's going to mean for their business model. But and again, this is part of the challenge, but also the opportunity for all industries involved. Most industries have a role to play in health. So it's working out what their future is going to look like as we move towards a different paradigm of how we see health, rather than just in terms of sickness. It has to be more in terms of keeping healthy and well.
Okay, so Diogo, let's try to get to a couple more questions. And Tina, this we got to do really short answers here. So.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to ask the toughest one. No, I'm going to. I actually, the questions are quite long, so I'm going to summarize them. Do you see any potential in a regional collaborative approach? So I guess they meant an international approach to tackle this problem.
So I think collaboration and partnership is absolutely at the heart of everything. And I think this is where, I completely agree, international collaboration, especially on some of these global, pandemic threats and access to good health for all. Of course, that's going to take international collaboration. But I think fundamentally it's a spirit of working together to solve the much bigger problems, because I think that's been part of the problem is that we've all been focused on our little silos, all in our individual kind of areas. We have to come together, and this is where I think the mission-based approach is so valuable. Ask the right questions, make sure you're addressing the right problem, and then work together to solve it. I think that's the ticket for success, and that's how we've done a lot with very disparate interests to get as far as we've done on a tiny team and with very little resources and all the rest of it. It's focusing on the mission, which for us was HLE +5, healthy life expectancy while minimizing health inequalities. So I think there are lessons to be learned from that.
So last question, Diogo.
Okay, so this is a yes or no question. So do you feel after the coronavirus, do you feel more optimistic regarding considering societal aging as a worthy problem to tackle?
Actually, yes, I think I am more optimistic. I think COVID's been dreadful, but actually it's opened our eyes and has given us a jolt.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I think that, what we have to work hard to do is to really transition that to getting public to getting the public to understand the potential of using that knowledge and now forcing it toward a healthier population so that we're ready to deal with the next disruptive problem. So thanks a lot, Tina. It was great to have you on the show. Hopefully we can see each other again somewhere soon.
I hope so. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us. I want to remind you that the panelists and all attendees button is available to leave comments after the show. We're going to do something completely different next week and have Herman Pontzer, who's an associate professor at Duke University, and he's going to talk about healthy as a hunter-gatherer. He's an anthropologist, and he'll be telling us about diet, activity, and energetics in humans, looking at some of our ancestors. So that should be an interesting show. And I know that many of you can't wait to see our final video every week. And so all I can say is hold on to your hats.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Well, congratulations on your 100th birthday.
Oh, yeah. That was 3 weeks ago.
Now, I understand you went to Universal Studios yesterday?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
And you know, the wind was terrible.
Oh, okay.
I had a skirt on, and the wind was just blowing it like that. And I was hanging on to my hat. And a kid came up and he says, lady, he says, you better stop hanging on to your hat and pull your dress down. You're showing everything you got. And I said, I don't care. What they see down there is 100 years old. This is a brand new hat.
I'm feeling like sunshine, like springtime, like something's in the water and I'm taking a deep dive. I'm feeling so weightless, like I'm gonna make it, and nothing in the universe can take this. I can see it clearly now, nothing gonna bring me down.